"Daddy, why do they sleep on that cold bench?" Then the CEO's answer surprised the poor single mom. "Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story." The air in Denver was biting a cold that pierced to the bone and clouded each breath with misty puffs that dissolved into the frigid air. Freshly fallen snowflakes drifted lazily in the lean gray sky, each one a tiny work of art joining millions of others, turning the city into a postcard of frozen, almost unreal beauty. The silence was nearly absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic crunch of fresh snow beneath the impeccable leather boots of Caleb Dowie, the 33-year-old millionaire CEO whose tech empire stretched across the country, branching into innovations that shaped the future. Caleb felt the familiar, gentle weight of his son George nestled on his shoulders. George's chubby 3-year-old hand, protected by a red wool mitten, clutched Caleb's blonde hair, tugging it slightly with each giggle that bubbled out of him. Their bond was a harmonious dance of affection and mutual trust. Caleb, a devoted father, shared custody of George with his ex-wife, but every moment with his son was pure gold. He would kneel to tie George's shoelaces, invent stories about dragons and snowbound princesses, and answer every why with the patience of a sage. George, with his wide, curious blue eyes, mirrors of his father's, absorbed the world around him with disarming innocence. Each snowflake, each white-covered tree, a new and fascinating discovery. He pointed at everything, his tiny index finger constantly in motion. "Daddy, look." George's small voice came muffled slightly by the wool hat covering his ears and part of his already rosy face. He pointed a mitten finger toward a nearby park bench, nearly swallowed by an untouched blanket of fluffy snow. "Why are they sleeping on that cold bench? Isn't it cold, Daddy?" The question, spoken with childlike simplicity, yet piercing truth, echoed in the morning stillness, rupturing Caleb's bubble of comfort and tranquility. Caleb followed his son's gaze, and a knot formed in his throat, tightening with a pain he hadn't expected to feel on this quiet Saturday morning. There they were, a young woman barely distinguishable beneath layers of worn clothing and a thin, frayed blanket, woefully inadequate for such a harsh winter, curled up, trying to shield herself from the merciless cold. Beside her, nestled close like a cub seeking warmth and safety, was a little girl no bigger or sturdier than George, her nearly white blonde hair dusted with a light layer of snow. They were Maxine Bowser, 26, and her daughter Lorraine, 3. The scene hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. The vast wealth, the undeniable comfort of his own life, the warmth of his home and his child's safety clashed brutally with their vulnerability. Homeless, exposed to winter's cruelty in one of the most prosperous cities in America. Still perched on Caleb's shoulders, George squirmed, his innocent curiosity shifting into a genuine concern that filled his small blue eyes. "Will they get sick, Daddy? Why don't they have a house like us?" The innocence of George's question struck Caleb with force, highlighting the injustice of the situation. His son, who had a warm home, toys, and plenty to eat, couldn't comprehend why others didn't have the same. A sharp jolt of compassion surged through Caleb, so intense that it pushed him to act before he could even fully process the image. He gently set George down in the snow, kneeling to meet his son's eyes, which now reflected an unusual seriousness. "Stay here for a minute, champ." He said, his voice rougher than he intended, already feeling the urgency to approach. "I'm going to see if they're okay." George nodded obediently, his blue eyes locked on the unfamiliar pair, his childlike curiosity now tinged with concern. He clutched the miniature snowman he had just built, as if the toy's simple presence could offer some comfort to those strangers. Caleb walked toward the bench, each step deliberately soft, the crunch of snow beneath his boots muffled by care. His heart pounded in his chest, squeezed by a mix of anguish and determination. He didn't want to frighten them, but he knew he couldn't ignore that image, couldn't walk away from that desperate situation. Just a few steps away, he paused, his shadow stretching across the untouched snow, an imposing figure but not a threatening one. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and filled with genuine kindness. He hoped it would be felt and not mistaken for threat or mockery. Maxine jolted awake violently, her body reacting to the sound before her mind could process what was happening. She blinked disoriented, her brown eyes half closed from exhaustion. Suddenly wide with fear like a cornered animal, her movements were slow and stiff, each muscle aching from the cold. Instinctively, she reached out her gaze, flying immediately to Lorraine, still asleep in a heavy, exhausted slumber, unaware of the stranger or the dangerous situation they were in. Fear shifted into a nearly palpable defensiveness across her thin, weary face, an expression Caleb instantly recognized as someone expecting the worst, someone used to facing hostility and judgment. She pulled Lorraine tighter against her as if Caleb were some predator about to steal her most precious possession. Her lips trembled, and her eyes already puffy from recent tears, and fatigue welled up again, not from the cold but from a deep, consuming pain and shame. Humiliation was visible in every fiber of her being, in her hunched posture, in the way she averted her gaze. But the urgency of her situation was greater than any pride. "Do you need help?" Caleb asked again, his voice thick with concern, free of judgment or pity. He knew that a person's pride could often outweigh hunger or cold, and he wanted her to understand that he wasn't there to judge. Maxine swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. When it came, it was choked with fatigue, shame, and a barely restrained desperation. We were evicted," she confessed, her words merely a whisper, as if speaking them aloud made the reality even more crushing. Her eyes avoided Caleb's, fixing instead on a distant point in the snow. We don't have anywhere to go." The last sentence broke, and a solitary tear, hot and bitter, ran down Maxine's frozen cheek, falling onto the threadbare blanket that barely protected them. Caleb felt his chest tighten even more, a deep, aching empathy overtaking him. Those simple words, "We don't have anywhere to go," were an abyss of despair, a silent scream for help he couldn't ignore. He looked at Lorraine again, so small, so innocent, sleeping under the unrelenting grip of winter, entirely at the mercy of her mother and the cruel world. His fatherly instinct, his deepest humanity, and his compassion all merged into one powerful, clear resolve. He knew what he had to do. There is no other option. He had to help. "I can help," he said, his voice now steadier, filled with conviction. "I have an empty house. You can stay there no cost, for as long as you need." Maxine's revelation, that simple, devastating phrase, "we have nowhere to go," hit Caleb with the force of a physical blow. The image of George and Lorraine, so small, so vulnerable, innocent in their unawareness of the world's harshness, moved him deeply, triggering a protective instinct he hadn't known, burned so fiercely within him. Caleb, a tech mogul with investments ranging from innovative startups to a sprawling real estate portfolio across Denver and its suburbs, already held the solution in his hands. He owned several rental apartments and houses. And as luck would have it, one of his luxury condo units downtown, a spacious, fully furnished, 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the Rocky Mountains, was vacant, awaiting new tenants. Without hesitation, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm of emotion in his chest, Caleb offered. "Maxine, I own some properties here in Denver. One of my apartments is currently empty. It's furnished. It has everything you and your daughter need. You can stay there no cost for as long as you need to get back on your feet." Maxine looked at him, eyes brimming with disbelief and a trace of suspicion. Pride a wall she'd built over years of hardship, fought fiercely against the paralyzing desperation. Accepting charity from a stranger, no matter how kind he appeared, went against everything she believed in. I can't accept," she murmured, her voice barely audible, but laced with quiet defiance. "I can't live off someone's charity, sir." It was then that Lorraine awakened by the soft commotion, lifted her small head from her mother's shoulder. Her blue eyes, once clouded with exhaustion, locked onto Maxine's with a pleading expression. Mommy, please, I'm so cold. I don't want to sleep here anymore. The girl's trembling voice, her simple plea, so raw and heartfelt, was the blade that pierced Maxine's pride, the silent promise of a roof. Warmth and safety for her daughter silenced every protest. Dignity could wait. Lorraine's survival could not. Maxine took a deep breath. The decision made. We accept, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much, Mr. Dowie. I don't know how to thank you. The tears she had been holding back began to fall freely down her cheeks. Caleb felt a deep sense of relief. You don't need to thank me, Maxine. Please just call me Caleb. Come on, grab whatever you have. My car is right over there. He gestured to the dark, imposing SUV waiting on the street, a glaring contrast to the life they had been living. The drive to the apartment was quiet, filled with tension and hope in equal measure. Lorraine curled up in the back seat, fell asleep once more, exhausted, while George watched her with the wide-eyed curiosity only children possess. When they arrived at the upscale building, the doorman greeted Caleb with respectful deference. Caleb led Maxine and Lorraine up to the apartment door, opened it, and invited them inside. The apartment was a haven of warmth and light, a stark contrast to the cold and darkness outside. The air was warm and faintly scented. The soft carpet cushioned every step, and the modern, comfortable furnishings welcomed them in. Maxine let out a sigh that seemed to rise from her soul, while Lorraine, now awake, looked around with wide eyes. "It's a princess house, Mommy!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with a child's unfiltered joy, making Maxine's heart clench tightly. Caleb walked them through the spacious living room, pointing out the fully equipped kitchen, the 2 cozy bedrooms, and the spotless bathrooms. Make yourselves at home. There's food in the fridge and groceries in the pantry. If you need anything, please let me know. Maxine turned to him, her eyes full of tears, but a trembling smile on her lips. Caleb, I don't know what to say. You've saved our lives. She extended her hand, and Caleb shook it, feeling the fragility, but also the strength of this woman. That brief contact carried an unexpected electricity between them. Her gratitude, sincere and spoken from the depths of loss, stirred in Caleb a deeper compassion and a sense of responsibility he welcomed. He stayed a little longer, making sure they felt safe. George, with the boundless energy of a child, soon approached Lorraine. "Want to play wee blocks?" he asked, holding out a small bag Caleb had brought along. Lorraine, hesitant at first, nodded. Within minutes, laughter filled the apartment, a joyful sound that Caleb and Maxine watched with warmed hearts. The barrier of circumstances and age disappeared between the 2 children, who quickly became inseparable building towers and knocking them over with gleeful shouts. In the days that followed, the apartment became a safe harbor. Caleb visited, often always bringing George, and many times bags full of fresh food and toys for the children. "Daddy, are we going to see Lorraine today?" George would ask almost every day, his blue eyes gleaming. And whenever possible, Caleb would say yes, using the chance to check in on Maxine and Lorraine. The visits became a ritual. Caleb and Maxine would spend hours talking, sitting in the living room while the kids played nearby. He learned that Maxine was an avid reader, sharp-minded with a dry wit. She discovered in Caleb a man who, despite his wealth and position, was deeply human, rarely boastful, genuinely kind, and admirably devoted to his son. He wasn't arrogant, nor did he flaunt his fortune. In fact, he seemed almost uncomfortable with admiration and sought genuine connection. One especially cold afternoon, as George and Lorraine built a pillow fort, Caleb and Maxine shared mugs of warm coffee. "You're different, Caleb," Maxine said, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "I always thought people with that much money would be distant, maybe cold." Caleb smiled, a soft expression that eased his strong features. "People are just people, Maxine, no matter what they've got in the bank. The truth is, seeing you and Lorraine on that bench, it got to me in a way I didn't expect. George taught me something important that day. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship blossomed deep and unexpected. The conversations grew richer, the laughter more frequent, and sometimes their glances lingered longer than necessary. There was a quiet attraction, a recognition between two kindred souls that went beyond gratitude and compassion. It was something new, a glimpse of a future that once felt impossible, now beginning to take shape in the warmth of an apartment that was once just a vacant property, but now becoming a home in the heart of a storm. The first dinner Caleb and George shared with Maxine and Lorraine, just a simple meal he had prepared himself, served at the small kitchen table, marked something profound. That moment, filled with children's laughter and easy conversation among the adults, carried a tenderness none of them had expected, revealing a glimpse of happiness they never imagined. They were no longer just a millionaire and a homeless single mother. They were two souls and two children beginning to weave a new tapestry for their lives. The friendship between Caleb and Maxine blossomed like a rare, resilient flower blooming in the frozen landscape of Denver. The apartment, once merely a safe harbor, was gradually transforming into a true home. With each visit from Caleb, accompanied by a radiant George, the connection between the adults deepened. Hours of conversation revealed surprising affinities. Caleb, who lived in a world of impersonal business deals, found in Maxine a genuine soul, a woman of remarkable resilience and dignity, even in the face of severe hardship. He was captivated by her sharp intellect, her subtle sense of humor, and her ability to find beauty in life's smallest details. Maxine, in turn, saw in Caleb a man with a big heart beyond his fortune, a devoted father, a thoughtful listener, and an unexpected friend. He wasn't arrogant, nor did he flaunt his wealth, and that disarmed her. Meanwhile, George and Lorraine were living proof that childhood innocence could bridge even the most distant worlds. Inseparable, their games and laughter filled the apartment with infectious joy. George often asked his father to go see Lo, as he affectionately called Lorraine, and Caleb, his heart full, always agreed, grateful for every chance to be near Maxine as well. The children built pillow forts, drew colorful worlds with crayons, and played with the toys Caleb brought along. For Maxine, however, the days were a blend of deep gratitude and growing anxiety. She worked tirelessly to find a job, determined to get back on her feet and support Lorraine on her own. But with little formal experience and a resume filled only with temporary and informal jobs, every door seemed to close in her face. She sent out resumes, made calls, visited employment agencies, but always received the same polite, disheartening responses. "We're sorry, but your profile doesn't match." Or, "We need someone with more experience." The stigma of being a single mother and the invisible scars of her past were powerful, unseen barriers. Weeks passed. The stack of rejection letters grew, and discouragement began to take hold in Maxine's heart. She didn't want to be a burden on Caleb, no matter how often he insisted she wasn't. One afternoon, while the children played in the living room, Maxine and Caleb were in the kitchen preparing a snack. She sliced fruit, her movements slower than usual. "Maxine, are you okay?" "You seem a bit down," Caleb observed, noticing the shadow on her face. Maxine sighed, putting down the knife and leaning on the counter, frustration pouring out of her. "I'm trying, Caleb. I really am, but it's so hard. I feel like no matter how much I try, nobody wants to give me a chance." Her eyes welled with tears. She tried to hide. "I don't want to be a burden to you. I need to get a job. I need to support Lorraine, but I can't seem to get anything. Nothing." Caleb stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Maxine, you'll never be a burden, and I admire your determination. It's one of the things I appreciate most about you." He paused, thinking. The solution was right in front of him. Obvious, but he hesitated, worried she might reject it out of pride. "I have a proposal," he began cautiously. Maxine looked at him, a flicker of hope, lighting her eyes, quickly replaced by skepticism. "What kind of proposal, Caleb?" "At my company, Doughy Innovations," he explained. "We have an in-house cleaning team. One of the positions just opened up. It's not glamorous, I know, but it's a steady job with good pay and benefits. Best of all, the hours are flexible, which means more time with Lorraine. He looked at her directly, his blue eyes full of sincerity. "I value hard work, Maxine, and I know you'll do a great job. Don't worry about what anyone else might think. What matters to me is having people I trust, and I trust you." Maxine stared at him, surprised. A job at a millionaire's company as a cleaner. It stung her pride, yes, but the opportunity was real. A paycheck, benefits, and a fresh start, and more than anything, the chance to be close to Caleb working in his world. She thought of Lorraine, of the stability this job could offer. Her hesitation lasted only a moment. She lifted her head, her eyes now shining with newfound determination mixed with immense gratitude. "I accept, Caleb. Thank you so much. I won't let you down." She shook his hand, the firm grip sealing the agreement and deepening the bond between them. It was a small step, perhaps, but for Maxine it was a monumental new beginning. The next day, Maxine stood at the grand entrance of Dowie Innovations' skyscraper. The lobby was a spectacle of glass-polished steel and light. People in expensive suits bustled about, the hum of business in the air. This was Caleb's world. When she saw him impeccably dressed and confidently greeting executives with the ease of a born leader, Maxine felt a pang of insecurity. He was the millionaire CEO, the man who ran everything here, and she, the newest member of the cleaning staff. But when Caleb spotted her, he smiled warmly and waved. He didn't act like she was just another employee. He treated her like someone who mattered. Watching him in his element, Maxine's admiration for him grew tenfold. He wasn't just a kind man. He was powerful, respected, and yet he had retained the humility and compassion that had rescued her. That moment, the contrast between their worlds and the bridge Caleb was building between them intensified the connection they shared. From that day on, small gestures of affection, knowing glances in the hallway, and quiet conversations during lunch breaks became more frequent, slowly weaving the threads of a romance that began to bloom in the heart of Caleb's empire. The days turned into weeks, and the presence of Maxine and Lorraine and Caleb and George's lives became as natural as the gentle fall of snow outside the apartment windows. Their once solitary and predictable routines gained new colors and melodies. At the gleaming offices of Dowie Innovations, Maxine was praised not only for her dedication and meticulousness, but also for her remarkable discretion and efficiency. She moved through the desks and hallways with silent grace, performing her tasks with a professionalism that caught the attention of her co-workers, and more importantly of Caleb himself. Small gestures like a particularly warm good morning from a colleague, or an encouraging smile from Caleb as he passed by made her feel like she belonged, something she hadn't experienced in a long time, but it was outside the corporate setting. During the evenings Caleb and George spent at Maxine and Lorraine's apartment where true magic happened. Movie nights in the living room with popcorn popping on the stove and soft blankets everywhere were a delight for all. George and Lorraine, now inseparable, would cuddle side by side on the couch, whispering and giggling, their childhood worlds intertwined. Caleb and Maxine sat in separate armchairs. But the closeness, the shared smiles over the children's antics, the glances that lingered, all wove a subtle, almost silent romance, an invisible thread that grew stronger each day. They laughed more. They talked about their deepest dreams and fears. The trust between them deepened with every revelation, every whispered confidence at the end of an exhausting day. The attraction between them was palpable, a heat that grew and enveloped them, even if not yet spoken aloud. It was a delicate dance of glances exchanged over the children's heads, of accidental touches, a hand brushing another while reaching for the same mug of hot chocolate, a knee brushing lightly on the couch, sending silent shivers through their skin. Mutual care and a profound affection far beyond mere friendship permeated every interaction. Caleb felt a peace with Maxine he hadn't known in years, perhaps not since before his failed marriage to Valerie, a relationship marked by coldness and superficiality. Maxine was a calm in the storm of his CEO life, a refuge he never knew he needed. "Maxine," he whispered one night as they watched the children sleeping soundly on the couch, exhausted from building a pillow fort. I've never felt so at peace as I do when I'm with you and Lorraine." His voice was low, almost a secret. and the darkness of the room, lit only by the soft glow of the electric fireplace, made the moment even more intimate, more vulnerable. Maxine, for her part, was experiencing a sense of security and love she never thought possible. After so many years fighting alone, Caleb's gentle and constant presence was like a balm for her wounded soul, an anchor in the stormy sea of her life. "Caleb," she replied, her voice soft, almost a murmur, "you've changed everything for us. It's not just the apartment, it's hope. It's you. You made me believe again." The ice castle her life had become built on fear and uncertainty was melting under the warmth of this new feeling growing inside her, a warmth threatening to transform her completely. One particularly gray Saturday afternoon, with giant snowflakes lazily falling outside, George and Lorraine were on the apartment's enclosed balcony, fully absorbed in building a miniature snowman using tiny twigs for arms and smooth pebbles for eyes. Caleb and Maxine were in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon and chocolate filling the air as they prepared hot cocoa for the kids. As Caleb poured the creamy milk into steaming mugs, his hand brushed against Maxine's, which was holding the next mug. The touch was brief, but an electric current ran through both, a soft but undeniable spark. Caleb's ice blue eyes met Maxine's velvety brown ones. The world seemed to stop. The distant hum of the city faded, and the children's laughter on the balcony became a mere background murmur. In that instant, there was no millionaire CEO and no humble cleaner, just a man and a woman with an undeniable attraction burning between them. A silent truth revealed. A heavy silence filled the air, more eloquent than any words ever spoken. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that what they felt for each other was deeper, more intense than simple friendship. It was love blooming in the snowy landscape of Denver, an unexpected and real love as pure as freshly fallen snow. Caleb felt an uncontrollable urge to lean in to close the space between them, and Maxine felt her heart race wildly, anticipating what might happen. The sweet scent of hot cocoa filled the kitchen, and George's loud laugh as he knocked over the snowman they had just built broke the spell. But the seed had been planted, and the roots of that feeling were beginning to grow deep. The peace, the quiet happiness, and the promise of a future that Caleb and Maxine were so carefully building were suddenly and violently shattered by a destructive and relentless force. Valerie, Caleb's ex-wife. Valerie, a woman of undeniable beauty, with flawless blonde hair, cold green eyes, and a slim figure maintained through discipline and costly treatments, carried an accurate aura of envy and resentment that corroded her soul and tainted everything around her. Her marriage to Caleb had ended just over a year ago, but she had never accepted the divorce. Caleb, exhausted by her superficiality, her constant pursuit of social status, and her blatant disinterest in George, had filed for separation. Valerie was an absent wife, more concerned with glamorous Denver high society parties and the latest designer collections than with her home or her husband's emotional needs. As a mother, she was equally distant and neglectful. Though they shared custody of George, he spent only a few days a month with her. And even during those short visits, Valerie delegated most of the care to a fleet of nannies, cooks, and staff. To her, George was more of a charming accessory for her public image than a child to be loved, nurtured, or protected. Her time with him was reserved for social media photos or moments of display. Valerie still haunted Caleb's life, obsessed with getting him back not out of love, but to reclaim her luxurious lifestyle. The doors the doughy name opened, and her secure place among Denver's elite. When news reached her that Caleb was getting close to a cleaning lady, as she spat the word with unbearable contempt, her fury ignited like a short fuse, threatening to explode everything in its path. The information came from an unexpected source, but one all too common in corporate environments: office gossip. Kevin, a low-level employee desperate for favor or recognition from Valerie, had noticed a change in Caleb's behavior. Co-workers saw how often he visited the floor where Maxine worked, the lingering glances he gave her, the way he always greeted her with a warm, genuine smile, something he rarely offered to other employees, especially not to cleaning staff. Sensing an opportunity, Kevin called Valerie that same day. "Mrs. Valerie, this is Kevin from Dowie Innovations," came the stammering, nervous voice on Valerie's phone. She was in her luxury penthouse apartment overlooking the mountains, flipping through a hot couture magazine board. "Yes, Kevin. What do you want?" This had better be important. "I'm busy," she replied impatiently, not even lifting her emerald eyes from the glossy pages. Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Well, I just wanted to inform you about a rather peculiar situation. Mr. Dowie, he's been very, let's say, close to one of the new employees from the cleaning staff." Ma'am Kevin paused dramatically, waiting for the words to hit. Valerie frowned, her previously bored face now twisted with disgust. Her blood ran cold. "A cleaning lady? Are you serious, Kevin Caleb?" Caleb Dowie with a cleaning lady. Her voice dripped with disdain, as sharp as the Denver air. The idea that Caleb, the man she still considered hers, the father of her child, could be involved with someone so far beneath her level, someone so socially insignificant, was a personal insult, an affront to her image and status. "Are you sure about this?" "You're not making it up." "Positive, ma'am." "He treats her differently. It's like they're close. And the kids, little George and her daughter, they play together at her apartment. I saw them the other day in Mr. Caleb's car. They look like a family." Kevin's final words were like gasoline on the fire of Valerie's rage. "The children play together!" She shrieked, her voice sharp and venomous, making Kevin muse on the other end of the line. "George is my son, mine." That woman is clearly trying to take advantage of his kindness. She's probably some filthy gold digger. She nearly shattered the phone as she hurled it onto her silk couch, crushing the fashion magazine in her hand. Her green eyes glinted with cold, calculated fury. She would not allow another woman, especially a no-name cleaning lady, to take the place she believed was rightfully hers. Revenge and public humiliation were the only things that could soothe her raging pride and restore her sense of control. Without wasting a second, Valerie, blinded by rage, threw on a luxurious fox fur coat and stepped into her Louboutin heels, each footstep resonating with relentless determination. She stormed into Dowie Innovations like a hurricane of resentment and fury. Marching through the grand lobby, ignoring the shocked stares of employees who shrank at her approach, she made her way to the main office floor, where she knew the cleaning crew would be working at that hour. She found her there, cloth in hand, quietly polishing a glass surface. "So, it's you, the new distraction in Caleb's life?" Valerie spat, her voice icy and full of scorn, echoing through the sudden silence in the room. Other employees cowered at their desks, feeling the oppressive tension. "A cleaning lady? My God, Caleb, you've really gone from bad to worse. Can't even pick women with a shred of class or dignity anymore." She waved a hand dismissively, as if Maxine were filth to be brushed away. Her green eyes sparkled with malice. "Must be hard for you, huh? Sinking so low just to get a roof over your head and a hot meal. Taking advantage of rich, naive men like Caleb." Valerie was savoring the scene. Maxine's humiliation was a spectacle for her, a way to reaffirm her own power and superiority. "Tell me, dear, what's your plan?" "Marry him and inherit a fortune." "Sorry, that position's taken and you don't have what it takes to fill it." The sting of those words hit Maxine like a frozen whip. Her hard-earned dignity seemed to slip away for a moment. She clenched the cloth in her hands, her face flushing with shame and a rising fury. Her mind spun, searching for a response. But before she could speak a word, a firm, unmistakable voice echoed behind Valerie. A voice that made Caleb's ex-wife freeze mid-diet tribe, spinning around abruptly, her eyes wide in surprise. The entire Dowie Innovations office froze, caught at a moment of shock and disbelief. It was as if an invisible conductor had commanded silence. The usual hum of clicking keyboards, the soft buzz of servers, and the rush of phone conversations ceased abruptly, replaced by a tense, oppressive quiet that made ears ring. All eyes, some curious, some stunned, were fixed on Valerie, who with her haughty posture and opulent fur coat continued to spew venomous insults, and on Maxine, who stood listening. Her face flushed with shame and restrained fury, her dignity hanging by a thread. Every word from Valerie was a dagger, and Maxine felt her chest tighten, her throat dry. Her brown eyes, once misted, now burned with a dangerous fire. Valerie, basking in the power of her theatrical performance, a cruel and victorious smile on her lips, was just about to launch one final humiliating blow, one last jab to crush Maxine under her expensive shoes, when a voice rang out, slicing through the air like lightning. "Valerie, that's enough." The voice was Caleb's, firm, deep, and filled with an undeniable authority that froze his ex-wife where she stood. He had appeared suddenly, stepping out from his nearby meeting room, his blue eyes sparking with an intensity few of his employees had ever seen. This wasn't the calculated calm of the CEO. It was the righteous, protective fury of a man defending what was his, what he valued. His once composed face was now carved with an expression of icy disapproval. "How dare you storm into my company and insult one of my employees like this, Valerie? This is unacceptable, a direct affront to my authority and to the dignity of the people who work here." Valerie turned abruptly, her porcelain face now tinged with surprise, and for a fleeting moment a nearly imperceptible flicker of fear that she quickly masked behind a look of indignation. Her green eyes, once brimming with contempt, now widened as she saw Caleb standing there defending that woman. "Caleb, what are you doing? This isn't your business." I'm just putting this intruder in her place. She's clearly taking advantage of you." "She's a gold digger," she blurted, trying to compose herself, forcing a manipulative smile, a flash of her old charm and victimhood tactics. But the restrained fury burning in Caleb's eyes only grew fiercer, glowing with an electric blue fire. Caleb took a step forward, his imposing presence dominating the room, casting a long shadow over Valerie. His voice, now lower, but still brimming with overwhelming force, pierced the silence. "Her place is here, Valerie, working with dignity and honesty. Unlike you, who only cares about money, shallow appearances, and manipulating everyone around you for your own gain." His words echoed through the room, each one a precise strike exposing Valerie's hypocrisy, laying her soul bare before everyone. Whispers stirred among the employees, some glancing at each other in astonishment at Caleb's boldness, but secretly admiring his rare display of character. "Maxine is a woman of integrity and hard work, Valerie. A woman who, unlike you, knows what it means to fight for survival, to cherish every victory, every scrap of dignity life offers. She builds while you destroy." He wasn't just defending Maxine. He was unmasking Valerie before everyone, revealing her true selfish and superficial nature. The cold air from Denver's snowstorm seemed to seep into the room, taking the breath of every onlooker. A heavy, awkward silence hung in the air, charged with almost unbearable tension. Employees who had been merely curious now stood genuinely stunned, watching Caleb with newfound respect. Maxine, initially surprised and overwhelmed by Caleb's impassioned defense. An act that filled her chest with unexpected warmth, felt a wave of strength and courage surge through her. Shame began to dissolve into a dignified defiance, an energy that pushed her forward. She wouldn't cower. Caleb's gaze, silently encouraging her with unconditional support and unmistakable admiration, made her lift her head, squaring her shoulders with a newfound fierce determination. With poise and grace, but with a strength no one expected from a woman previously seen only as the new cleaner, she addressed Valerie. Her brown eyes were steady, filled with unwavering conviction, unflinching. "Miss Valerie." Maxine began, her voice surprisingly calm and clear, yet with a steely edge that caught Valerie off guard and made her recoil slightly. Maxine took a step forward, narrowing the distance between them, showing she wasn't afraid. She would not be intimidated. "My circumstances do not define my character. I'm not here for money, not yours and not anyone else's. I'm here to do honest work, to rebuild my life, and to give my daughter a future she can be proud of. She is all that matters to me." She took a deep breath, holding Valerie's now wide, faltering gaze. Those green eyes losing their cruel shine, replaced by a hollow defeat. "And I will not accept being humiliated by someone who doesn't know me and who clearly cares about nothing but herself and her own empty, superficial image. The room seemed to collectively exhale an audible sigh of relief and admiration. Valerie stood stunned, speechless, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. The mask of superiority crumbled from her face like a sandcastle against the high tide, revealing the fury and shock beneath. Her lips trembled, trying to form a retort, but nothing came. The humiliation of being publicly confronted, not just by Caleb, but by Maxine, the very woman she had scorned and underestimated, struck her with full force, annihilating her arrogance. Caleb looked at Maxine, pride swelling in his chest, deeper admiration illuminating her gaze, her strength, her composure, her dignity under fire. She was everything Valerie was not, and everything he had longed for in a partner. Their eyes met, and in that moment an unbreakable bond formed, a love tested and tempered in the heat of conflict. The scene cemented their connection, exposing Valerie's true face for all to see, and sealing irreversibly the love blossoming between Caleb and Maxine. Outside, the Denver air was still freezing, snow still falling gently, but within that office, a powerful warmth had been ignited. Not only between Caleb and Maxine, but in the hearts of all who had witnessed that act of bravery of justice, and above all of a love bold enough to defy every convention. Enraged, humiliated, and desperate over the loss of control that the scene at the office had represented, and over the visible blossoming of Caleb and Maxine's relationship, Valerie felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. That woman, the cleaning lady, had dared to defy her, and Caleb, her ex-husband George's father, had openly defended her. Valerie's fury bubbled up, consuming her. Insulting Maxine was no longer enough. She had to destroy the happiness they were building. In a desperate and calculatedly cruel move, Valerie played her vilest and most manipulative card. She initiated a legal battle for full custody of George. Her intention was clear and perverse: to use the child as a weapon, an emotional blackmail tool to force Caleb to return to her. Believing his love for his son would be his fatal weakness. "He'll do anything to have George back," she whispered to herself, a cold, calculated smile curling her lips as she plotted her next steps. The idea of having George under her sole control to use as leverage against Caleb filled her with a macabre satisfaction. Valerie, through her expensive and unscrupulous attorneys who operated in the shadows of ethics, crafted a courtroom narrative riddled with half-truths and distortions. They painted Caleb as an irresponsible and impulsive father. "Mr. Dowie is not a fit parent," she declared in filings and public statements, her voice melodramatic and dripping with false concern. "He's involved with a homeless woman with no resources, just a cleaning lady. This exposes George to an unstable environment, questionable influences, and a complete lack of a structured home." She voiced these accusations in courthouse hallways, in front of reporters and staff, hoping the bad faith would spread, staining Caleb and Maxine's reputations. "I'm George's mother. I am the best choice for him, with the stability, comfort, and upbringing he deserves." Far away from these distractions and questionable affairs, Caleb's heart clenched painfully with each new report of Valerie's accusations. Hearing his son being used as a pawn in such a cruel game, turned into a tool for his ex-wife's revenge, cut deeper than any personal insult ever could. He felt Maxine's anguish too exposed, again judged her dignity questioned before the world. He would not allow Valerie to hurt George, or by extension the woman who was capturing his heart and to whom he now felt inseparably tied. Determined to protect them both, he called on his best legal team, an elite firm in Denver, known for its impeccable integrity and its relentless pursuit of truth. The initial meeting was tense, with Caleb laying bare his concern. Spare no effort, he told the attorneys, his voice deep resonant with unshakable determination, his blue eyes flashing with a tightly controlled fury. "Valerie cannot have full custody of George. I won't allow it. Do whatever it takes to reveal who she really is and to make sure George is safe." The investigation began immediately. Caleb's legal team mobilized with military precision, working tirelessly day and night. They dove deeper into Valerie's financial and social past than anyone ever had. Days turned into weeks of relentless work, meticulous data collection, digging through bank and property records, and confidential interviews with former employees, old friends, even previous accountants of Valerie, who finally freed from fear, were willing to testify. Slowly, a tangled web of lies, financial irresponsibility, and illegal activity began to surface, exposing the truth behind Valerie's perfectly polished high society facade. They uncovered suspicious financial transactions in offshore accounts, clear and irrefutable evidence of embezzlement from a prestigious orphan children's charity, of which Valerie was the honorary president. Funds meant for vulnerable kids had been funneled into her personal accounts to sustain her extravagant lifestyle. They found detailed records of lavish gambling habits, hidden debts in luxury casinos in Las Vegas and Monaco, and impulsive shopping sprees on designer clothes and jewelry that left her perpetually on the brink of bankruptcy, wholly dependent on Caleb's generous alimony. Beyond the financial evidence came heartbreaking testimony from former nannies and staff who had worked for Valerie. They exposed her chronic and cruel neglect as a mother. George was often left alone in the care of unqualified strangers, while Valerie jetted around the world on private planes or indulged in her luxuries and parties. One former nanny, voice trembling with emotion and guilt, described in detail a disturbing incident when baby George had been left alone for hours, unattended and locked in his crib, while Valerie attended an exclusive charity gala. This harrowing event had once been silenced with money and threats, but now resurfaced with devastating force. The undeniable proof of her illicit activities and maternal neglect hit like a tidal wave, obliterating any pretense of her fitness as a mother or as a decent human being. The carefully crafted image Valerie had spent years curating, that of the perfect suffering high society woman, was about to collapse in spectacular fashion. The preliminary custody hearing became the stage for this dramatic revelation. The tension in the crowded courtroom was almost unbearable. Every breath seemed amplified. When Caleb's attorneys began presenting the evidence one by one with surgical precision, Valerie's face transformed, the confident smile, the air of superiority, all drained away. Her face went from pale to ashen green, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief as each of her lies was exposed. She tried to object, her lips moving, but no sound came out, a strangled whimper at best. It was as if the walls of the courtroom were closing in, crushing her. Caleb's anguish was visible in every tense muscle of his face, fighting not just for custody of his son, but for Maxine's honor and for justice. He carried the weight of the world. The moment Valerie, pale and visibly shaken, realized that her lies were unraveling one after another, that she was losing control of everything, her meticulously constructed image, her financial and social future, and George himself, was a devastating blow for her and a breathless, suspenseful moment for everyone present. The air in the room was thick with anticipation as they all waited for the final verdict. The courtroom was a stage of raw emotions where palpable tension mingled with the scent of old paper and shattered hopes. The custody case for George had dragged on for agonizing weeks. Each session, a new round of accusations and defenses, draining everyone involved. Finally, the day of the final verdict arrived, and the courtroom was packed with headline-hungry journalists, drama-seeking onlookers, and loyal friends who came to offer support. Caleb, his face serious and marked by sleepless nights, held Maxine's hand with a firmness that spoke of his unwavering support. George, unaware of the gravity of the moment that would define his future, silently played with a small fire truck in Lorraine's lap, who sat comfortably on Maxine's knee. They formed a picture of unity, an unlikely family, but one deeply bonded by love, compassion, and resilience. The children's presence, innocent and joyful, was a silent reminder of what was truly at stake. The judge, a woman with a stern demeanor and a deep formal voice, began reading the ruling, and the courtroom fell into absolute silence, broken only by the rustling of papers and the click of cameras. Valerie, seated at the defense table in her usual posture of superiority, wore a confident smile, the look of victory on her face, convinced that her manipulation and influence would secure custody of George. But the arrogant smile froze on her lips, twisting into a grimace of disbelief as the judge began to review the evidence. The evidence presented by Caleb's lawyers was overwhelming a tsunami of irrefutable truths. Every detail, every illegal charity fund transaction, every gambling debt receipt, every testimony about her neglect as a mother from the incident when George, still a baby, had been left alone, to the nanny's accounts of the many times Valerie ignored him, was exposed without mercy, painting a devastating portrait of her conduct. Valerie was fully and humiliatingly unmasked. Her facade of innocence and victimhood crumbled before everyone's eyes, her hypocrisy and cruelty laid bare for the world to see. She shrank in her seat, her eyes wide with horror, her breath caught in her throat. The judge, her voice unwavering, delivered the sentence that would change their lives forever. Given the irrefutable evidence of Ms. Valerie's unlawful conduct, as well as her demonstrated inability to provide a safe, stable, and healthy environment for the child, and with the best interest of the minor, George Dowie, as the court's primary concern, full custody of the minor is hereby granted to Mr. Caleb Dowie. A collective sigh of relief filled the room, almost audible. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of months of anguish and tension lifting from his shoulders as though an invisible burden had finally been removed. He opened his eyes and looked at Maxine, his blue eyes full of immense gratitude shining with unconditional love. He squeezed her hand tightly, conveying all his relief and affection. Maxine smiled at him, her own eyes brimming with emotion, joy, and a hint of disbelief. George, sensing the shift in energy, looked up. "Daddy, did we win?" he asked in a small voice, pointing at the toy truck. Valerie, in shock, stood up abruptly, her eyes wild and her face twisted with rage. "This is absurd. A mistake. Caleb, you can't do this. He's my son. You can't take him from me." Her voice was a hysterical shriek, shattering the courtroom's decorum. But her outburst was quickly silenced as security acting swiftly escorted her out of the room, her image of power and influence forever destroyed, her scream of rage echoing through the halls. With his ex-wife finally out of their lives and the path clear of obstacles, Caleb and Maxine could at last build the family they had always dreamed of, free from threats and manipulation. That night in the house Caleb once offered as a refuge, now a permanent loving home, an intimate and emotional celebration took place. The table was set with the children's favorite food, and the sound of laughter filled the air. "George, Lorraine, we have something important to tell you," Caleb said, kneeling to meet their eyes. Maxine by his side. George and Lorraine, their faces smeared with cake, looked at them curiously. "You won't be separated anymore. We're going to live together, all of us, forever. You're brother and sister now, and we're a real family." George's eyes widened. "Really, Lorraine's gonna live with us every day, Daddy, yes, champ?" Caleb replied, a radiant smile on his face. "Every single day." Lorraine hugged Maxine tightly, then ran to embrace Caleb and George, forming a family hug that sealed this new beginning. The romance between Caleb and Maxine blossomed fully, a love built on the solid foundation of respect, trust, compassion, and a truth that had been tested and proven. Maxine was no longer just the cleaner. She was Caleb's partner, Lorraine's loving mother, and soon George's stepmother, a warm, present maternal figure. Something George had never known with Valerie. No one could tear them apart again. In the cozy living room, the warmth of the electric fireplace filled the space, mirroring what burned in Caleb and Maxine's hearts. They sat together on the plush sofa, the velvety fabric a stark contrast to the cold bench in the park where it all began. George and Lorraine, now siblings by heart, ran through the room, their joyful voices composing the melody of happiness, a symphony of children's laughter Caleb never knew he could have. He wrapped his arm around Maxine's waist, pulling her close, feeling her warmth against him. He gently kissed the top of her head, her hair smelling of shampoo and the subtle scent of home as they watched the kids play without a care in the world. Outside, Denver continued to snowflakes, dancing hypnotically against the window glass. But the relentless cold no longer mattered. The warmth radiating from their hearts had transformed a cold park bench into an unforgettable love story. One of resilience and a family that against all odds found its happiness and came together forever. We want to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story.